What's going on, world? It's your boy at Big Game James _36. I'm here with Greg McGarity, and this is the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection show presented by Toyota. Each and every week we go over the last weekend's slate of games and the games that are coming up this weekend and how it affects the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl here in Jacksonville, Florida on December 29th at noon. Last weekend, very interesting. A lot of stuff kind of happened. Some teams that we thought would kind of continue to push themselves up into the premium pool, did it. And then upsets happened. Again, one of the most exciting college football seasons that I've had. What were your thoughts on the overall weekend?
Well, we got to see in person the Wake Forest Duke game up in Durham, and that came down, to the final field goal at the end of the game, and certainly helped Duke move up into the standings. They have a big game with North Carolina this week. Obviously, it'll be a big game, but Clemson's win over Notre Dame kind of took Notre Dame out of the New Year's Day 6 and into the premium pool for the ACC. NC State's win over Miami was huge. And then on the SEC side, the Missouri-Georgia game provided a little separation there. Alabama's win over LSU as well was a highlight, but probably the most surprising thing was Arkansas beating Florida at home, which really put a crimp, I think, in Florida's chances to become bowl eligible, because they're going to have to upset one of these teams in the last 3 games to be bowl eligible. So a lot of funny things, weird things happened Saturday, but what new? That seems to be the common theme now.
Especially Florida's got a lot, like 3 teams high scoring, with 2 of them with pretty good. Two of them with pretty good defenses. Yep. Missouri's more scrappy than what people give them credit for. LSU plays a Pac-12 style of football right now, but they can put up points in bunches. And Florida State is doing pretty good, obviously, this season. And I think they've given up 4 passing touchdowns all season. So that's pretty good. The Notre Dame loss, could you talk to us a little bit about Notre Dame and what their affiliation with the ACC and the bowl selection and how that actually does kind of affect the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl?
Well, they're not eligible to play in the ACC championship game, so it doesn't affect the conference record for them or the teams that they beat or lose to. But what it does with Notre Dame, it puts them in the bowl mix with the other teams in the ACC. But what it did, it eliminated them from being in the New Year's Day 6 bowl game. So we can't take Notre Dame again because they can't repeat at a site 2 years in a row, but it certainly takes up a space to where Tampa or Orlando or San Diego would be in the running because they're going to be a popular pick. I don't care what their record's going to be. But it certainly helps us in a bit because they have to take up a space that normally would have been vacant if they had moved up into the New Year's Day 6 games.
So that helps us with a better ACC selection for a more exciting game. Right. Onto the SEC side, moving into this week, so there are some games that could affect. I want to know, what is the Ole Miss Georgia game like? If there was an upset in that, could that kind of shake up things here for us with the Gator Bowl?
Absolutely, because it all depends on really the standings at the end of the year, and if you're kind of in that top 12, you're going to play more than likely in one of the New Year's Day bowl games or the college football playoff. But it does mess things up for Georgia's perspective because they have to play at Tennessee next weekend. So really, there are 2 huge games, and you mentioned Ole Miss and Georgia, but even more for us, the Missouri-Tennessee game. Watch out for that game. That's going to be it's going to be at 3:30. It's going to be a game that's really going to be highly competitive. And the loser of that game falls into more or less our bowl pool, but also the winner would also be in a pool as well. So really a good game, but it certainly will be dynamic to see how Tennessee responds on the road, and can Missouri continue to play as well as they've been playing. So
what are some of the games that you're looking forward to on the SEC side first this weekend, and what obviously you said Missouri, Tennessee, right. Ole Miss, Georgia, but what are the other ones, and kind of what makes those matchups intriguing?
Well, you've got Florida at LSU. Can Florida, like we said earlier, Florida needs to win another game to be bowl eligible. If they get on a run, which wouldn't be unheard of, there's no telling where they would be in our pool. But the SEC, I think, is in danger of having 5 teams that are not eligible to play in a bowl game. You got Mississippi State, South Carolina, Arkansas, and Vandy. Some have already been eliminated, but if Florida joins that group, it's going to be a tough bowl season for the SEC as far as filling all the spots that they have to fill. Can teams get hot at the end? South Carolina got hot at the end last year. Can they get hot? They've got a pretty favorable schedule ending the year. Of course, they play Clemson at the end of the year. But you've got a lot of teams, again, if they get hot at the right time, they get healthy, they can certainly make a difference and perhaps play their way into our game.
So how many bowl games does the SEC have automatic tie-ins to?
Well, you've got the college football playoff, and then you've got the New Year's Day Six. Below that, the Citrus Bowl would have the first pick once those teams in the that are playing up in the New Year's Day Six have been selected to. So you have the Citrus Bowl that have the first pick, and then there's 6 other bowls that would then be in the mix for an SEC team. It's Jacksonville, Tampa, Nashville, Houston, Charlotte, and Memphis. And at that point in time, a lot depends on what the schools that have better losses, where do they want to go. It gets into the best matchups. You can't repeat again because LSU went to Orlando last year, so they can't go there. Kentucky was in Nashville, so they can't go back there this year. So you've got a team like Missouri and Auburn who haven't been here in decades. In the ACC side, you've got Duke that's never played in our game, Boston College that has never played in our game, and a handful of schools that haven't played here in this decade or this century. So a lot of things come into play, but the good news is there are probably 8 teams in the ACC that are still in the hunt, 7 teams in the SEC that are in the hunt. So you've got half the conference teams in play for our game. So a lot will be more separation after week 11 and even more separation, obviously, after week 12.
So going over into the ACC, what are the games in the ACC that we should be looking forward to? Obviously, we have a major rivalry game this weekend with Miami and Florida State. Miami's one of those weird teams, started off very hot, but much like Florida, their last 3 games are very, very difficult, and they're going to need to win at least one of those to stay in our premium pool, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So just kind of go over that. What are the things that we're looking forward to? And then the question I want to ask is that there is something that you have on the board that we may have to be looking for from the ACC side that could affect our picks that way.
Well, I think there are 2 games. You mentioned the rivalry game in Tallahassee this weekend, but really the Duke at North Carolina game is huge. Carolina has 7 wins right now. Duke has 6. Can Duke upset maybe UNC on the road in Chapel Hill? Then the other game, 2 teams that have 5 wins. Georgia Tech travels to Clemson. Clemson's been hot or cold. Obviously, they had a big win last week. Can they keep that momentum going and provide a little separation there between those schools? Because Clemson probably has an easier path than perhaps Georgia Tech does. If Georgia Tech wins the game, they've still got to play Georgia at the end of the year. So really an interesting 2 games there in the ACC that we're really taking a look at. And don't sleep on Boston College. They're 6-3. They have 3 winnable games at the end of the year. So we'll see how things work, but it's very feasible for them to win 9 games this year.
Very scrappy. It's funny how things change when we went from Florida State. Oh my goodness, they're being punished for struggling with a team that could have 8 or 9 wins that nobody kind of saw coming, which is one of the beautiful things about college football. So on the ACC side, how does the selection process work? A lot of similarities. Obviously, we know we have the college football playoff. If you have a team go there, you still have 1 team eligible for the New Year's Six. But what happens after that?
Well, you've got, again, if there's a Big Ten team playing in the Orange Bowl against the ACC, then the ReliaQuest Bowl, the former Outback Bowl, would have their first pick of the groups in the premium pool. Then below that, it becomes Jacksonville, the Pop-Tarts in Orlando, and San Diego. So you've got North Carolina that cannot go back to San Diego.
Okay.
So you've got some dynamic. Clemson was in the Pop-Tarts Bowl 2 years ago. NC State was in the Holiday Bowl 2 years ago. So you've got some dynamics there as far as the inability to go back to a bowl that you participated in last year or 2 times in the last 3 years. So those metrics come into play. You've also got to where Tennessee and North Carolina State can't play each other because they play next year. You've got A&M that can't play Alabama. You've got LSU. Well, FSU is going to be up higher, but you've got situations there like Florida could not play Miami because they play next year. So those dynamics come into play once there's more clarity in teams. So as I said, after week 11, which is this Saturday, you're going to have a lot more clarity on who's in and who's out.
Gotcha. So ReliaQuest, with Notre Dame being bumped down into our premium pool, more than likely they're going to probably be
I would think so.
If they continue to do what they do. So there's some really, really good teams there. Depending on what Miami does, Boston College being for the city, cold weather people kind of like a little bit of warmth.
Absolutely.
So it's probably going to be snowing there. So I think Amelia Island and Jack's Beach looks a lot better.
No question.
than that. And then you still got Clemson potentially in there, which their fans might be a little disappointed, but still better to end the season some kind of way. Now, question. Let's say Louisville loses or drops a game during this process. They do play the University of Miami next week, I believe. Does that kind of shake up things a little bit more, or is it potentially because they're almost a lock to be in the ACC championship, the loser of the ACC championship will go to the Orange Bowl?
You know, it all gets down to rankings, where they are in the college football playoff. They have to send a team to Miami to play in the Orange Bowl because they're the anchor team to that bowl. Will they play a Big Ten opponent or an SEC opponent? I mean, there's a dynamic to where Alabama, if they end up losing to Georgia in the championship game, they could be in the Orange Bowl. But it just depends on where, for instance, where does Penn State go if they lose this weekend with 2 losses? If Ohio State and Michigan play up, then that feeds a spot, then probably Penn State would move into the Orange Bowl. But if there's only one Big Ten team up in the top 4, more than likely they're going to have a Big Ten team in Miami unless some wacky things really happen. So we're hoping that there's not a Big Ten team in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That makes our pool stronger. But again, we can't take Notre Dame regardless of where they finish.
So after that, ReliaQuest will get the first pick, but it looks like Jacksonville gets the next pick after that.
And it all depends on matchups at that time because they're all in the premium pool at that point in time, and so there are eight areas that the ACC makes their decision on priority. It has to do with the best matchup, who's closest to the bowl site, direct wins. Like Clemson has lost to NC State this year, and they've lost to Duke. So those 2 teams probably have a priority, if all things were equal, over Clemson because the ACC wants to reward teams that have a better record as far as head-to-head wins, things of that nature. They want to feed them into the premium bowls and give them a better shot than a team that might be more popular to a bowl site. But the ACC is very prescriptive on who they pick to go into their bowl game.
So, and those who, if you're a Green Jacket member, one of the benefits of being that, outside of just scouting, you get to actually learn more in depth about how the process is because we have a couple meetings coming up.
Right.
But just for those who don't know, so is it like that you take, when it's all said and done, do both sides just say, hey, here are all the bowls that we're looking at, here are the best matchups, or the SEC says, hey, you guys are getting Ole Miss, and then the ACC kind of comes up to a huddle and says, all right, here's who we think could beat Ole Miss, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, it's a dance between the ACC and the SEC as far as, and us giving our opinion on what we'd like to see, and we're not the final decision maker. And ESPN would weigh in too, as far as ratings, things along those lines. But those are the things to where we have to maybe be the middle person talking to the ACC and the SEC about what does it look like because I'm not so sure the ACC and the SEC are communicating together. So we have to be that conduit to feed information probably to both conferences on what's it look like on our respective sides. And then they're able to really eliminate matchups that could happen as opposed to those that could not happen. So it'll really be interesting to see how it all plays out. And that's the fun part about what we do is kind of like musical chairs. But again, we don't get to select who plays in our games. It's an agreement with the ACC and the SEC, ESPN. We all get together and provide the best matchup. But as I said, the SEC has a little bit more latitude. The ACC is very prescriptive.
Well, the fun part that we do all the time is guessing. So looking at the guesses that some of the top people have put, we have actually some of these matchups were good. The CBS with North Carolina versus Missouri. Right now, what I've noticed is each week there's like a flavor of that week. So it looks like Missouri is that team, right? Missouri and LSU are that team. Right. Any one of these probably more accurate than the others, or I know we have one they seem to always be off.
Yeah, there was one that was really kind of crazy that I took off the board because they didn't do much homework, and really one ESPN poll or prediction has Notre Dame coming here against LSU. Well, we know that's not happening, so I'm not so sure I would pay much attention to that. So you've got some interesting, like you said, it's kind of the flavor of the month, but you've got, North Carolina is a common opponent, Clemson, Duke, NC State, and then on the SEC side, you've got Missouri that's popular, you've got Ole Miss, you've got LSU, Tennessee. So regardless of which way you pivot, you're going to have two big brands playing in our game, which bodes well.
Now, one of the things, again, being in the premium pool, if Florida becomes bowl eligible, do they have enough wins to be in the premium pool, or is it kind of one of those things where, we'll figure it out?
Well, they probably would not be able to jump teams that have maybe 8 wins. Definitely not 9, because everybody wants to come to Florida. So they would not really be in a position to where they could pick where they want to go, depending on what they do. But if you have 6 wins, you're not in a very good position to dictate where you go. You're probably going to be told where you're going to go, whether you like it or not.
Interesting question, just because of that, just kind of thought about it. It was the old man, who I call him that affectionately, Coach Bowden's birthday was yesterday. And I remember Florida State in his last season coaching was only 6-6. They were able to get bowl eligible. Yep. How did that work? Or was just one of those things where, you know what, we scrap rules. This is a special opportunity. We got to take this over. Like, are there cases like that do happen from time to time?
Could be. I think the conferences have the ability to waive anything they want to waive. So everything's kind of on the table. Will it happen? Probably not, but there's always that option that they have to create certain dynamics there. Even back then, there was no SEC team against FSU back during that time that played in the game. So the Gator Bowl has not always had ACC versus SEC. The Big Ten was in play for a number of years. So it's always been inconsistent, but we've had some consistency during this point in time, and certainly for the next 2 years after this game. We still have the marriage with the ACC and the SEC, and what happens beyond that, we'd love to be able to continue that relationship because both conferences are expanding and getting better. So we're in a good spot for the next 3 years, this year and then 2 more years, and then see what happens once all of the contracts are up for really all the bowls and the conferences after the 2025 bowl game.
Second week of the college football playoff, still controversy. A lot of people feel left out. A lot of people feel disrespected. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. What are your thoughts on the 4, and would you change those 4? And kind of how do you see it kind of shaping out?
Well, I think everybody expects the loser of Michigan, Ohio State to drop out. So that's why 5 and 6 are huge as far as the placement goes, because they're on the doorstep. And in the Pac-10, Pac-12, they have a championship game, which still will have some say that happens after the final week of the year and first weekend in December. So I think things, I think some are important as far as placement, because I think if Texas and Alabama win out, Texas is going to be ahead of Alabama. Ole Miss, if they win out, they're not going to jump Alabama. So you got some dynamics on placements that they're pretty much set in stone because they've already made decisions that head-to-head wins are going to probably have more priority over just maybe the eye test or metrics or things of that nature. So if you're seeing teams, it's kind of like Washington and Oregon. Right now, Washington beat Oregon, so Washington's ahead. So pay attention to the head-to-heads because I think they're going to come into play more so, as I said, than the eye test or maybe other measurables that the board may be looking at.
It's just funny because two of the conferences that are dissolving, basically, that everybody was poo-pooing on, have some of the stronger teams and are having some of the strongest seasons that they've ever had. Maybe we should talk about conference realignment every other year so that people could actually perform at a higher level. Now, one question that I've gotten a lot: how are the locations picked for the college football? Does the number one seed get the opportunity to pick where they want to play, or is it 1 and 4 automatically go to the Sugar and 2 and 3 go to the Rose?
No, the top seed has really a preference. Would they rather play in New Orleans or would they rather play in California? And then so whatever happens, that pivots, but that top ranked team basically has that choice because they want to go the closest place where their fans can travel and parents of the players can travel. So once that top-seeded team makes that decision, then everything falls into place after that.
So it's really just, all you want to do. If you're not number one, you just want to be 2 through 4. At that point, it really doesn't matter. So appreciate everything, all the insight, great college football season wrapping up soon. But for the next couple weeks, we're going to have a lot of excitement continuing. So I'm at Big Game James _36. This is Greg McGarity. We appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us for the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl Drive to Selection presented by Toyota each and every week. We'll see you next time.